right. Hello, everybody. We are now officially getting started. So rural towns and smaller municipalities have specific challenges when it comes to the installation of electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and they may often face multiple roadblocks to the implementation of those plans. In this webinar, experts from electric co-ops, regulated utilities, electric vehicle supply experts, and Clean Cities coalitions will share case studies and best practices to help you avoid the pitfalls that can impede your plans for an effective and equitable charging infrastructure. So first, we would like to thank our sponsor, SWEPCO, and our Clean Cities partners for the help with this webinar. And that is the Clean Cities of Central Oklahoma and Tulsa area Clean Cities. Thank you all so much for your participation. And before we introduce our panelists, I want to take a few minutes to talk about the Clean Cities program. Since transportation is such a critical aspect of our nation's energy consumption, the Department of Energy has offices that focus on how transportation relates to the DOE priorities of national security, economic growth, affordability for businesses and consumers, and reliability. The DOE's Vehicle Technology Office, or VTO, develops advanced transportation technologies that fit with the department's main priorities of improving energy efficiency, increasing domestic energy security, reducing operating costs for consumers and businesses, and improving global competitiveness of the US economy. The VTO team includes these 5 sub-programs shown here, and most of these efforts are focused on early stage R&D. And our program, Clean Cities, resides in the Technology Integration Division. And each of our coalitions operates independently, but we all focus on these key areas. In Clean Cities coalitions, we're all fuel neutral and technology neutral. So you're not going to get just the one-size-fits-all solution that some organizations are pushing these days. We want to work with you and our stakeholders to identify the right fit for your specific needs. And chances are, if you're here in the United States, you have a Clean Cities coalition near you. And if you don't have one nearby, you can always call one that's close by, and we're all ready and welcome you and happy to help you. And if you're encountering a challenge, it's very likely that another Clean Cities coalition or stakeholder has faced the same challenge and be willing to talk about their experience and work with you. Clean Cities coalitions provide the assistance, information, and resources to successfully plan and execute alternative fuel vehicle and fueling infrastructure projects, whether that's providing technical assistance for on-the-ground project or making connections to VTO funding opportunities or facilitating local and national partnerships. These activities, combined with access to the information, technical assistance funding, and project planning capabilities, it makes Clean Cities and the coalitions the successful program that it is today. So a little bit about us, Louisiana Clean Fuels. We were designated in 2000, and we cover 56 parishes in Louisiana. And we believe that it is our job to remove the barriers that prevent fleets from adopting alternative fuels, both public and private fleets. And we work to find the problems behind the issues and help to remove those barriers to help get these fleets moving. We're your boots on the ground who know what's going on in the communities and help you get your project started. So today, like I mentioned in the introduction, rural towns and smaller municipalities have very specific challenges when it comes to installing electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And today, we're going to show you how 2 mostly rural states are making serious progress towards building out an effective charging network along their interstate corridors. So today's presenters, we're going to have 2 stories that we're going to present to you today, the Oklahoma story and the Louisiana story. So these are our presenters from Oklahoma. It's Mark Falkenberry, the VP of Marketing and Member Relations with Western Farmers Electric Cooperative. Adrian Janes, the Alternative Fuel Project Manager at Indian Nations Council of Governments, or NCOG. Eric Pollard. He is the Air Quality and Clean Cities Coordinator for the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments, and Matt Ellis, the Senior Business Manager of Development for Francis Energy. Where is this going? There we go. And then for Louisiana, we have Jeff Thigpen with Alternative Energy Resource Manager for SWEPCO, Chelsea Attic with Customer Programs Marketing Director with SWEPCO, and myself. So we're just going to go over just a few things in general before we get you started to make sure we're all kind of on the same playing field. But, why are we here today? And it's to talk to you not only about the benefits of electric vehicles and electric vehicle supply equipment, but to help you figure out how to get things started in your community. You might ask, why would a small town or a rural area, rural community want to invest in electric vehicle charging infrastructure? And there are many reasons why. For one thing, electric vehicle owners, and I'm one, we will plan our trips around where chargers are, where the best chargers are, where the places to shop. If it's safe, if it's great for our family, if we're on a road trip, we want to have something to do for the 30 to 45 minutes that we're going to be stopping to pull over and charge up. So, and we're loyal. We're very loyal. Once we find a great stop, we're going to make sure we stop there all the time. So it's a great way to bring attention to some of your historical districts, your shopping districts, your cultural sites, and to really bring some attention back to your town. And, when we stop, we shop. So it's a great way to really get some economic development going in your areas. So we're really excited that you're all here today to learn about this. So electric vehicle sales, we may be thinking that, in rural areas and in rural communities or even smaller towns, electric vehicle adoption may not be as strong as in some of the larger cities, but it is coming. And we are seeing upward trends like this in Louisiana and Baton Rouge. We're seeing that same bell curve that we're seeing nationally. And just to give you a quick update, just these numbers are of August 2020. The cumulative number of plug-in electric vehicles sold in the United States is now estimated at 1.6 million vehicles. That's a lot of plug-in and fully electric vehicles on the road right now. And over 164,000 were sold in the first 8 months of 2020. And that's pretty good considering what was going on in 2020. Not a lot of people were out and about. So those numbers in a normal year would have been much higher. And battery electric vehicles are now more popular than the other plug-in electric vehicles, which is exciting. To give you a little bit of idea of where we stand nationally, yes, Louisiana, we are number 41 when it comes to electric vehicle adoption. But like I told you earlier, our curve is just as sharp and it's going up just as fast. So we'll eventually hopefully be catching up. And our friends at Oklahoma will be filling in their information as well on where they lie on this map here. You'll be seeing this again later, but this is a question that everyone asks. How long does it take to charge? And the answer is always, it depends. Adrian will be going over this in a bit more detail, but we want to make sure that you said this multiple times. A lot of it depends on the vehicle that you have and the speed of the charger. And this is like a really good guideline for level 1. It's just when you're plugging up at home in a regular wall socket. Level 2 is what most people have curbside on streets, shopping malls, or maybe in your garage. It's the same thing as a dryer outlet. And the fast chargers are the ones that we are working very hard to get along our DC fast charging corridors, along our interstate corridors. So if you want to take a look at electric vehicle charging infrastructure across the country, in your state, and in your neighborhood, the Alternative Fuel Data Center, AFDC, the station locator, is a great place to go. So this was just as of a couple of days ago. Oklahoma has 238 stations, which encompass 641 charging outlets. This is for level 2 and level 3 combined. Louisiana is at 123 stations and 317 charging outlets. And talking about our corridors, this is specifically for fast charging. And this was the last round that has been completed. The Federal Highway Administration has this program where you can apply to have your corridors approved if whether or not they are ready for signage. And to qualify for electric vehicles, you must have a DC fast charger every 50 miles within 5 miles of an interstate. So Louisiana, we're just getting started. And with some Volkswagen funding, we're hoping to have our corridors complete in a couple of years. And you're going to hear from Oklahoma about the work that they've done to get their corridors complete and hear about the successes they have. Because if you take a look at their state, they've got a lot more going on than we do with the fast chargers. So we're going to go right into this and get you started with Oklahoma with Adrienne Janes. She's going to give you a little bit more of a background on some tools and some basics that will help get you started. Then Eric Pollard will tell us all about what's going on in Oklahoma. And then we'll go to Mark and Matt to finish off the Oklahoma story. So take it away, Adrienne.
Thanks, Anne. Your presentation there reminded me of something I didn't put in my presentation, but want to add your points about EV drivers being loyal and seeking out those locations. A couple of years ago, we surveyed EV drivers in Oklahoma, and we found that over 50% of them always choose to patronize businesses with EV charging when they are out and about. And then the other really important bit of data we got from that survey was only about 10% of people say they never purchase anything or spend less than $10 when they're out charging. The rest was a range from $20 up to more than $60. And so even if you're not making a lot of money on that charging station itself, if you've got it in a retail location, you probably are making money from people who are essentially tethered to your location for 30 minutes. So anyway, just wanted to get that bit of information out there. But my name is Adrienne Janes. I'm the Clean Cities Coordinator in Tulsa for Tulsa Clean Cities. And so just wanted to share with you a couple of the resources that we have either found or created over the past few years that have been helpful on this journey. Next slide. So Anne showed you that chart of the different types of charging equipment. And if you've never been around EVs or you haven't thought a whole lot about them before, it's really important to understand sort of the segmentation of where EV drivers charge. With a traditional vehicle, it's easy. You go to the gas station, that's it. And so moving people away from this mindset of going to a specific place to charge to fuel their vehicle is part of the evolution of EVs. So what people typically think about when we talk about EV charging is what they see out in public. So it's that public network, and that's the map you just saw from Anne. But what you find when you drive an EV and you own an EV is solidly, 80 to 90 is what the official research shows. I think it's probably higher now. To 95% of your charging is actually done at home because that's the easiest. You get home, you plug it in, and you're good to go. From the utility perspective, it's easy. There are sort of minimal upgrades that need to be done. Sometimes, in some cases, none that need to be done in a home to have an EV. But if you have multiple EVs, there's more. So there is planning that needs to happen on that end. But when a house gets their first EV charger, kind of minimal. Then the next place is workplace. Workplace is another great location to have EV charging, particularly in a rural context. I think we're not just talking about workplaces within the rural areas, but also within the cities. We need to pay attention to the commutes and where people are driving from, because I know we've got a lot of people who commute into the cities from the rural areas, and having that availability of charging at their workplace is really helpful to give them the confidence they need to be an EV driver. And then the last place is public, out and about, all of the places people typically think of when they think of EV charging. Okay, next slide. So this is the slide Anne showed earlier. Again, I won't go all the way through it, but understanding the different locations where people want to charge and what they want to do when they're at those locations and the different user experiences in each of those locations can help you create a better charging network. And it can also help you save a lot of money and spend your money more wisely. Because if you look at the cost breakdown, the equipment cost breakdown, it's huge. This is just the charger cost, equipment cost listed here, not the installation price. But again, anywhere from using an outlet you already have to upwards of $150,000 for a top of the line fast charger with all the bells and whistles. So understanding the different use cases is really important. Next. So again, here's some resources that we've either created or are aware of, and so want to make sure that you have access to those. Next. So this is just, and Anne touched on a couple of these too, but I'll say them again. Cars are parked, statistics show that cars are parked 95% of the time. So again, understanding the behavior of what your customer needs and where they are, and putting the chargers where those cars are instead of trying to make those cars go somewhere else can, again, make the network better. And understanding the charger type and the natural dwell time of that location. If you own a fast food restaurant, you probably don't want to have a level 2 charger because you might have people hanging out there for several hours. And so you want to make sure you're matching those technologies to the location really well. Again, the corridor project Anne mentioned, prioritizing highway corridors and destination locations with regional draws. So, if you have, a rodeo that draws people in from everywhere, if you have a car show or a high school football game or something where people are driving in from longer distances, looking at where you can put chargers there to facilitate that drive. And so one way we did this in Tulsa was putting chargers in our parking garages next to our arena. So people who might drive in from Oklahoma City or Muskogee or Okmulgee, they can they come to town, plug in, go out to the restaurant, go to a concert, and then when the concert's over, they're charged and ready to go home. So that's just thinking through locations like that. Then just functionally, when you get down to where in the parking lot is this charger going to go, considering where electrical panels are, where transformers are, to reduce a lot of costs in installation and transformer upgrades. And then you want to think about how can you place it so that it's not easily blocked, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So next slide. A couple of DC fast charging. I think in the corridor project, you can locate it within 5 miles of a highway corridor, but one is really a great option as well. I think there is benefits to having people come a little bit farther off the highway. If you've got a really great historic district and a main street, I think people are willing to drive in for that. But if it's just going to be in a gas station parking lot, getting that as close to the highway as possible is really great. Making sure you have adequate power supply at that location. If you're not the utility, reach out. Your utility should be your first call. If you are the utility and you haven't started getting these calls yet, I would highly recommend that you establish a point person internally to be able to take these calls and work with EV charging developers, because they will start calling you very soon. And then again, think about that user experience: access to bathrooms, shopping, restaurants, amenities, and good lighting. Think about what that location is like at every hour of every day. So in August and in February, what's it like to be standing out there at noon or at 8 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night? Because people will be accessing the charger all the time. So next slide. This is a guide that our coalition put together a couple years ago. Tulsa was doing a comprehensive overhaul of its zoning code for the first time in 30 years, and we coincidentally had some funding. So we hired that same firm to write this guide. So it had the great double impact of getting a lot of these updates into our zoning code and providing this resource for others to use. It covers all the alternative fuels, not just EV, but it's available on our website. So you can see it there, and encourage you to check that out. It's got sample ordinances, all kind of things you can cut and paste and research, try to make it easy for you. Next slide. This is another resource we have on our website, but this is just a snapshot of a little piece of it, but thinking through where how you locate those chargers within a parking lot to maximize flexibility and make sure that even if one person blocks the charger because they don't know what it is, or they're just being a jerk, that it's still accessible if somebody needs it. So next slide. Again, this is just another image from that document, and there's a couple of street images so you can think that through as well. So next. Want to point this tool out. It's from AFDC, the Clean City, or the Department of Energy, and it's got some really great resources for you to really easily take a look at how many chargers you need to serve your area, and then if you're a utility, what your load profile, what impact on your load profile EVs can have. So next slide. So if you click on the load profile, there's a ton of inputs. You can customize this. There's a lot of different cities are in here. A lot of small cities are in here. A lot of the really small cities are not in here, but there might be an equivalent size location you can look at, but you can model different load profiles from a ton of different inputs, number of vehicles, weather, time of day, all kinds of things. So it's a great resource if you want to look at how EVs can impact your load. Next slide. And then in the other tab, it's modeling how many chargers you need and what type of chargers you need. So it's a great way. It takes 30 seconds. It's really easy. You just do a couple of inputs and then it gives you suggestions on what number of chargers you should need, what in different types. And so what it doesn't do is tell you where they should go. And so that you should call your Clean Cities coordinator for, and we can help you think that through. But it's a great way to start setting some early goals. Next slide. And then this is the corridor map through the alternative fuel station locator, so you can understand where those gaps are in your area and figure out, try to make sure that you've got charging every 50 miles along interstates and highways. And so this is a great tool to just quickly look at those corridors and figure out where the gaps are. Next slide. And this is not a resource, it's just a reminder. Plan for maintenance. It's not a set it and forget it thing. I took 2 of the 3 of these pictures and it was a terrifying thing in, I'll tell you, Gallup, New Mexico, in the middle of not much to get up to the charger and see that non-payment shut off. Fortunately, the charger was still working, but just making sure that you have a maintenance plan and that people are monitoring it and it's an active program and it's not just something you set and forget about is really, really important. So next slide. And then here's Oklahoma's map. So as of September, I haven't looked since September, but in September, we were officially 2nd overall in terms of installed DC fast charging capacity per capita. And so we're really excited about that. And with that, I would like to introduce my counterpart, Eric Pollard from Central Oklahoma Clean Cities, to tell you a little bit more about how we got there.
Great, thank you, Adrian. So my job here today is to set up the two of the people that are most responsible for the success of what you see there on the map in Mark and Matt. So I'm going to try to get out of the way as soon as I can. Just to touch on a couple of things, I think it's important to ask the question why for rural America when it comes to electric vehicles. And it's simply put that people in rural areas drive more. And from what you'll hear, I think from Mark and from SWEPCO is that with the rates that we have in particular in the South Central US, households can save a significant amount of money by going electric when it comes to their transportation costs. And transportation costs are a growing part of what a household, household percentage of what they spend their money on. So you heard from Ann on some of the other benefits, but I did want to touch on that. Also to build off, Ann showed the EV sales trends, and I can't tell you enough. I think one of the most important things is to understand what your EV adoption is, track that, work with your Clean Cities coordinator to determine where you're at in terms of EV adoption. You can even get it down to the zip code level. And I think understanding that and forming that baseline is important, both on the residential side and then even on the fleet side. So the Oklahoma Electric Vehicle Coalition is an informal working group administered by ACOG and NCOG and made up of the utility partners, the dealerships, the charging providers in the state of Oklahoma, gathering together to build partnerships, share ideas, and break down barriers, really forming that network basis for how we approach increasing EV adoption and breaking down those barriers. The things that have driven the coalition discussion for us as much as, what you see on that map there of getting charging out in our communities. We've done that a few ways. I think many of you are familiar with the Volkswagen settlement and the opportunities that states have to invest in electric vehicle charging through that. And that certainly has guided our discussion in the coalition, as has the Federal Highway Alternative Fuel Corridor program that you heard about. But another important part of the state of Oklahoma story is a state tax credit for alternative fuel equipment, charging and fueling equipment. And this is a tax credit that's about over 10 years old now. And this is another way to illustrate why it's important that you work with your Clean Cities coalitions. That tax credit in particular has been driven by all the alternative fuels, the EV side, the CNG side, and the propane side, trying to incentivize the growth of alternative fuels in Oklahoma. And from that map there, you see that that tax credit was an important part of the story. So our coalition discussions about legislation and policy and informing those discussions that happen at our state capitol and in our regulatory agencies is extremely important, as Mark will touch on later. One last thing is our coalition has looked towards the EV drivers, the early adopters in the state of Oklahoma. There's EV enthusiasts all over the country, and Oklahoma and Louisiana, I think, are not going to be exceptions to that. You can learn a lot from your EV drivers. They're a great resource. They're the ones out there using your chargers. They're buying the vehicles. They're having those discussions at the dealerships. And so they're really a great resource to work with. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark to keep telling the story.
Thanks, Eric. Everybody hear me okay? Excellent. Well, first of all, I want to add just a quick point. Western Farmers, we're a generation and transmission cooperative. You guys are very familiar with us, probably work quite a bit. And then we have 21 distribution cooperatives that provide retail electric service to our area. But the point I'm wanting to make is kind of adding to what Eric and Adrian have indicated. When you look at it from an electric utility perspective and you're in charge of marketing, this is like manna from heaven. Let me give you a little statistical information to back around it. From an electric utilities perspective, each home that we're able to get an electric vehicle installed in, the electric utility can see somewhere between a 40 to 60% increase in the number of kilowatt hour sales that they have to the home. Okay, so in a marketplace that we're seeing a lot of flat to declining energy sales, EVs represent a tremendous opportunity for cooperatives to communicate and proactively work with their members, because the key to us is not when, it's when that energy is actually sold. So you see a lot of our effort and the things that we're going through have to do with a lot of education about educating and designing rate structures to make sure that consumers are purchasing that energy when they're fueling at home at night. Part of that reason is we have a tremendous amount of renewable energy in the Oklahoma marketplace, and there's nowhere for it to go. So there's nothing better than to move that into the transportation sector for the next day. So I just want to, now, you look at the other side of that, we talked about the savings. From our data, well, what we've seen from EV drivers based off our low cost of power, and also because of the price of gas, our members are seeing somewhere between a 60 and an 80% savings in fuel alone on an annual basis. Okay, when you take that into account and then you look at the maintenance costs, which are significantly lower, that's why a lot of rural consumers are starting to become early adapters. A lot of the people that we're working with, they travel all across long geographic regions. We have many people that might drive all the way to Oklahoma City to take and go to Tinker Air Force Base and work there. And so we're starting to see more and more of our members, and they have greater commutes, and their savings are either greater than what we've indicated. But as I've indicated, Western is a generation transmission co-op. We have 21 distribution co-ops. You see them across the area. So geographically, we cover about 3/4 of the state of Oklahoma and the eastern side of New Mexico. Next slide. When Western looked at this strategically, I have to admit, and I'm going to go ahead and throw out, I use these all the time. Matt normally laughs at me, but my advice is going to be, don't get the cart before the horse. One of the things we learned early, we started our program back in 2017. We're very excited. We'd done quite a bit of research just as ourselves. But what we found out very quickly, we went straight to the far left bottom corner. We started trying to talk to car dealers about it. We thought that they were going to be as excited as we were about this, a new opportunity for them to sell vehicles. And I will tell you, I was humbled, and it literally brought us to a point that we changed our entire strategic plan to what you see now. And that conversation went something like this. I'll never forget. He goes, Mr. Falkenberry said, we know, and we've been watching EVs. He said, but I've got a question for you. He said, how many electric vehicles does your organization drive? What type of rate structures do you have to incentivize homeowners to have electric vehicles? Where are these people going to charge these cars across your state? And so they really made me think that what we've got to do is strategically go to the top of this circle you're seeing. And we had to educate. Then we had to move into infrastructure development before we could even go and talk to the dealers. But maybe first and foremost, by becoming a member of our coalition, if anything, I strongly encourage this. We found we were a much stronger voice at the Capitol, because there will be things that you have to work through at the Capitol. We found we were a much stronger voice as a unit including the investor-owned utilities, the electric cooperatives, the municipal programs, and then other interested parties, the tribes in our state, the cities in our state. And it's that coalition, that collaborative effort that really has kind of propelled everything that we're going to discuss. Next slide. So when we talk about education, you have to educate yourselves. So back in 17, we started this. We even had to educate our members. For those of you in cities, you're going to have to educate at the chamber level, and you're going to have to start getting people in your community to understand why you need to be on what we call the EV roadmap. And the reason is because this is dynamically shooting upward. More and more and more consumers are going to have EVs. And as Ann indicated, they're going to go and they're going to spend their dollars. So we started talking to tourism. We started talking to the people. We love the corridor concept, but as you're going to see in a few minutes, our vision was to say that we need a statewide charging network that anybody that wants to drive an EV can feel comfortable and take away some of what's called range anxiety. Then we had to work with our own members. We had to start educating legislators. Remember, back in 2017 is not where it's at today. We had to start talking to regulators. We also had to understand that we had to then start to educate the consumers that bought our electricity that this is a good deal. And last but not least, then we could get back to starting to educate our car dealers. Next slide. So as we started to come around the corner, and some of these overlap, but we had a tremendous opportunity, as Eric had indicated. We had a great tax incentive rebate restructure. We found a strategic partner that could monetize that as a utility, because as a utility, we couldn't. We found a partner that had a common vision to what we were looking for, and Western Farmers formed a strategic partnership with Francis Energy to go out and build the statewide charging network that we had looked at. But we also backed up and quickly went to them and said, look, we also have corporate needs. If we're going to drive a fleet of vehicles across the entire state, so we worked with them to install level 2 chargers at all of our corporate facilities for all of our pool cars, okay, all of our pool vehicles. And we are now making a concerted effort to start to change every vehicle that's in our fleet to an electric vehicle if it's applicable. Why? Now that we can drive across the state and go everywhere we need to go, and we can do that with an electric vehicle, why as a utility would you not use your own product? We've also installed level 3 public charging, again, partnering with Francis to make sure that all of our corporate facilities have DC fast chargers. So when our members come to our corporate facilities or anyone visits our corporate facilities, we're walking the walk. Because the one thing that we have learned, you can't sell what you don't live. And so as we've went through this process, everything from our corporate needs all the way to working with our member cooperatives, looking at residential opportunities. For example, the pilot that I have listed here, we are now working with 2 or 3 of our co-ops where we would install a home charger that has sub-metering capability so that at the home, the electric utility can actually have an electric bill specifically for the car charging that would be different than the electric rate that they would have for the home itself. Very interesting. And we're literally working where all of this is done automatically for EV homeowners. We're even going as far as talking to every contractor and providing them a rebate when they're building new homes to put the EV infrastructure in place and have it readily available as people get ready to go. So it's a mindset change as you look into that future. And then last but not least, as I've already stated, our partnership with Francis has literally brought us into doing something that most people did not believe was possible in a state like Oklahoma. And you say, well, what do you mean? Oklahoma, very much like Louisiana, is not only rural, but we're a fossil fuel state. Oil and gas is one of the predominant entities, but yet we've been able to work cohesively, been able to pull this together, even in our state that's driven by oil and gas industry. Next slide. So our vision was to have a statewide network. Now, this is an early picture, but think of those blue balloons around each one of those blue circles. Those are 50-mile ranges. So as we started to work with Francis, the 2 things we knew we needed, we wanted these strategically set en route of where we went to go and do business. We have generating facilities in 3 different quadrants of our state. So we knew when our employees were going to our facilities, we needed infrastructure strategically placed to help us get to where we need to go. We also knew that we had co-ops in specific areas of the state that when we were going to see our co-ops, we needed infrastructure. So once we got that piece put in place, we started filling in the gaps. You see these white surface areas. That's where we started working with Francis using our relationship with consumers, businesses, small communities to take and fill the gaps of the map that you've seen. And if you'll move to the next slide, we'll show you that again, as Adrian's already shown you, ultimately this is what we've ended up with. We have a level 3 DC fast charger geographically spaced every 50 miles across the state of Oklahoma. Now they range from 50 kW in the very remote areas all the way up as you come back more concentrated Oklahoma City, that some of these may have multiple 250 kW generators, just because that you're on a corridor or different areas that are set. So they were very strategic in working with our partner as to how they were placed. Next slide. As a result, if you want to look at it by the numbers, the tax credit went away at the end of 2019. So there was a lot of rush in that first year, but Francis was able to set up 109 what we call stations. They're individual sites. Some of those stations may have one charger there, as I'd stated. Others may have 3 or 4. It all depends kind of strategically where they're set. But a total, at the end of that year, by December 31st, they had to be commercially available, had 253 connection points, chargers that an individual could use. By the end of 2020, Francis has come back. They have decided they added a few more so that we ended up with 114 stations in the Francis network, and then a total number of 363 chargers. So they've added over 100 chargers to the existing sites in 2020, and those will be completed by year end. So when you look at our state as a whole, we also have 23 other providers. So you can see that our relationship with Francis is by far the largest portion of the statewide network, but we do have 23 other providers, people like ChargePoint, Electrify America, others that were strategically set as well. And by the way, when you see those numbers, they are a composite of, we didn't put 150 miles, we put it 50 miles away from them. We didn't want to sit next door and try to compete. We were just trying to cover the infrastructure. So when it was said and done, at this point in time, by the end of 2020, we will have 137 stations, specific sites where you can charge from. Next slide. Now this, like I said, we've made huge headway. Really, 2020 was supposed to be the year of working with dealers. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is a rough road to hoe, guys. It's not as easy as you'd think. I worked at a rural distribution cooperative for about 15 years, and one of the things that I learned, car dealers in those rural areas are entrenched in the local chambers of commerce. Most of them are 3 or 4 generations that have ran that car dealership, and they're instrumental and key in the community. But one of the things that we've learned, not only do we need to educate them about where this is going and that it's real, but we need to listen to them. And we need to understand their issues and concerns. As I'd stated earlier from the story, you can't sell to them what you don't live. So it's going to be difficult for you to go in and get somebody to see a vision. And I've had it pointed out more than once that, Mark, we see you rolled in with your Ford F-150 pickup. And I said, guys, that's only because I'm waiting on Ford to develop, and it's in process of giving me a pickup that I can buy. Those pickups are on their way. As a matter of fact, Monday of next week, I'm meeting with Lordstown in the state of Oklahoma. We've already had the Ford F-150 here. It's a matter of time when these pickups with 300 and 400 mile ranges are going to be there. And our members, once they realize that they can use that pickup, even in short tows, and that they have 400 miles of range and can save 70% on fuel, and they're buying that electricity from their local electric cooperative with the convenience of pulling into their garage, there's going to be a lot of our members and people in rural areas that are going to eat this up. I'm not going to say every home is going to have all EVs, but we're estimating that within the next 10 years, that as the cost of electric vehicles get closer and closer to cost parity, because the cost of the battery technology is dropping, that we believe that there's going to be this quick cross that a lot of people are going to say, I'm ready for that, because it saves so much money on fuel and maintenance costs. It's interesting. So again, you can't sell what you don't live, but you better understand, to these dealers, they see this as a disruptive technology. When I say that, most rural car dealerships make the brunt of their money not off selling new cars. It's off of their service and maintenance shop. And the thing that concerns them about EVs don't have no maintenance. And they're a little concerned about this change, this disruptive technology that's being introduced in the transportation sector, and how do they fit into that? How do they move forward if half the cars go one direction and I don't have the dollars coming in for the maintenance? And so there's that aspect. There's another aspect that they recognize that it's going to cost money. One of the things we've started to do is reach out and said, look, what if we were to rebate you as a car dealership, as a utility, to help you offset that $30,000 you're going to have to spend to train your maintenance technicians to work on these vehicles, to train your staff, to help you buy the tools that you're going to need to put into your shop. Do we really, as a utility, expect them to pick all that up betting on the come? Or should we work cohesively with them as this transportation sector really starts to evolve? And one of those that we've heard clearly, and we'll talk about this later, is salesman training. A lot of car dealerships have a lot of salesmen that come and go. And what we really need is, there's been more than once that I went to a car dealership intentionally and asked about buying an EV. And I bet if I watch, you'll see a lot of head shaking of EV buyers. The first thing most of these salesmen try to do is convince you not to buy an EV. And the reason is because they have not been trained to know how to sell that electric vehicle. They don't understand kilowatts. They understand gallons. They don't understand battery technology. They don't understand demand charge. So it's a factor that we have to, and we're excited. We're going to be working with Ann in Louisiana, and we're looking at trying to put together a nationwide electric salesman training program that would be an online resource working with clean cities, electric cooperatives, and utilities nationwide, so that a car dealer would be able to go online and become a certified electric vehicle salesman without having to do anything but go to the internet to do it. And we think it's a great opportunity for us to pull, because this is a major issue that's out there for most salesmen. They just don't know anything about these cars, and they really don't know how to sell them. And the dealerships love the fact that you're providing training for them at no expense. Because again, it is costly for them to get into this business. Next slide. That's it. Matt, I think we're handing it to you.
All right. Hi, I'm Matthew Ellis. I'm with Francis Energy. Just want to start and say thanks to Eric and Adrian and Mark for all the work we've done over the last 2 years. And I consider you guys friends. And I mean, you're EV drivers. We're going to get Eric an EV. We're going to start a GoFundMe and get Eric an EV. But for Ann, thanks for letting me be a part of this. I think it's great that you seem like you orchestrate these so well. I think it's really cool that you also put them on YouTube. I watched some of the previous ones. The only thing it's missing is that you're not saying click to subscribe or smash the like button. But I think it's great that you do that. I was able to go back and look at some of the people you've had on here and hear their perspectives, and that's fantastic. So I've got 5 slides, very YouTube, mobile YouTube friendly. We're going to look at the map first. And so for those of you in Louisiana, in Oklahoma, we have 3 major highways. East to west, we have I-30 or I-40. It's very heavily traveled. There's lots of Teslas that pass by us heading to Kansas City and other places. North and south between, that I-35 is between Kansas and Texas. And then from the panhandle of Texas over to Arkansas is I-40. And then we have one that cuts across, which is I-44. That one is predominantly turnpike travel. We made sure we put chargers on all of those highways. And some of the photos I'm going to show you are of sites that are on those major corridors and what our thought process was when we went in to build those. To make this happen, as you're looking at this map that has 109, it's 114 now sites that have chargers. And Mark, none of them have one charger. Your level 2 behind the fence doesn't count as part of that 114. But lessons learned, where we started was looking at other infrastructure that was out there. So we looked at Electrify America and we looked at Tesla. And there were many times we would get in the car, go travel around other states. We would jump the fence to see what kind of equipment they had behind the fence. Even got my drone out to look at it. But we wanted to learn everything we could about what type of a setup that they had and what they were trying to accomplish. And what the theme of it was, you can't just have one. Now, maybe you can have just one to start out with, but you at least need to build the infrastructure around it to easily support multiple. It's easiest when you're building to add that infrastructure in at the beginning and be able to support multiple chargers, even if you're just putting in 1 or 2. And so that is, like Mark alluded to, what we are doing this year. We're going back and we're adding 134 DC fast chargers to existing sites with a few new locations. And it was monumentally easier to do that this year than it was in the original push in 2019, because we already had the infrastructure. We already had conduit in the ground under the concrete, very minimal, not as nearly as invasive as it was the first time around. So that was one of the lessons learned. I mean, it was just a strategy we used with the resources we had at the time, and it set us up for the future opportunity. So something to keep in mind. Now, each of these dots can represent different agreements that we have and different partners that we have, whether it was working with an individual business or someone that owns multiple properties like a grocery store or a rest stop chain, even to municipalities. Set in a lot of city council meetings to get agreements over the line, speaking with counties or parishes in this case to get agreements done. And that conversation in 2019 was very different than it is today. It was walking around with a piece of paper talking about, hey, we want to do this project. I don't have anything to show you, but I want you to trust us. And so it took a while to build that trust, to get the utility on our side, or to be on the same page so that we could both come together to get that project started. In the original outreach, we called over 2,000 businesses in Oklahoma, businesses, governmental entities, and that led to the network that you see here. We think it's pretty incredible. I've been to all of these sites personally, and you've got a picture coming up in future slides of a Honda Clarity. That was my baby for 2 years. I put 90,000 miles on that car to get to these sites. It's since found a new owner, but it was incredible. So let's take a look at, if you'll go to the next slide, we're going to take a look at a few charging sites. And so we're going to start with highway charging, and then we're going to look at some destination charging. And then I just wanted to touch on payment methods and how we contrast with, say, the Tesla supercharger network and what they're so used to. This site right here, this is actually on a turnpike between Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Interesting note here, you may wonder, why do they sit on the edge like that and they're not set up like gas pumps? Well, it really comes down to cost. It's much easier to lay conduit and do all of that on the site at this point. We think in the future that, and you'll see, I'm not ready for the next slide, but you'll see next what a future site would look like. It's real. But the other thing I wanted to note when it comes to these highway sites is that these are in and out type stops. What we're seeing from the data is that people will stay for about 20 minutes to get to their next spot. The questions asked over and over is one of the first things said here: how long does it take to charge? And how do you answer that question without having 5 questions yourself? It really does depend, but the data does show us they spend about 20 minutes. And to that point, we think it's very important that you have your fastest, your most powerful charging stations on these highway stops. We wanted them independently powered, independently have their own communications for redundancy. We see things with other providers, such as like a share power option, where you could say have 2 chargers together and they can share power between 2 cars. We don't really believe that's the best setup for a highway site. You'll notice that Tesla is moving away from this in their version 2. They shared power. I don't know that it led to any fights, but it probably wasn't preferred for the drivers. But we try to independently power those. We want people to get in and out of those spots as quickly as possible, as close to gas station, gas pump speed. One of the funniest things when you first take a car to an electric, to your first fast charging session, the first thing you figure out is, what is a bollard? Well, that's the piece that sits in front of the charger and keeps your car from hitting the charger. The second thing you learn is a skill, and that is how to park very, very close to these things. So it's been funny to see that. Go to the next one. This is more of, and my talk isn't really about future proofing, but with what we know that's coming out in the future as far as pickup trucks, larger, mid-duty, heavy-duty vehicles, we thought it would be fun to build a few locations that are capable of handling that. And like the site before that I showed you, this one as well, since this photo, we've added more chargers to it. So it actually has 6 now. But as you can see here, it's capable of a vehicle pulling through and coming up next to it. We think it's going to be great for the Ford F-150 or the Lordstown truck or the Rivian that comes out, that they'll be able to pull up even if they have a trailer in tow and easily use one of these chargers. Really fun to build that type of site. Again, this one was on a turnpike, so they really don't have any other options when they're on there to pull off unless they go into the community around it. Yeah, that's all I wanted to show you for that one. Next slide. Destination chargers. This one is outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, an area called Broken Arrow. This is a hotel and conference center, and these chargers are slightly different than the ones I showed you in the last 2 slides. These are what we kind of refer to as destination chargers. Most people, and like the information you've seen already, you think of level 2 as an AC charger that might be up to 9.6 kW. What we're seeing from the data as these trucks are going to start rolling off is that they're going to have batteries that are upwards of 130 kilowatt hours. And if that thing rolls into a hotel with only 20 kilowatt hours in the tank, a level 2, the way we know of it, is just not going to cut it. So we were okay with placing 50 kW chargers at a destination location because we feel like there are going to be vehicles out there that would need to use that 50 kW almost like a level 2, or what we think of as a level 2. Another thing that I see just when we talk about the different speeds and the voltages for particular sites, typically with a level 3, you'll see 480 volts as the requirement for the site voltage, the power coming from the utility. But really, you can also use 208 volts. It's honestly not as preferred, but depending on the site and the existing power, if we're not wanting to bring new power in, 208 volts may be what's existing, and we can still build a DC fast charger off of that. Again, I would still prefer 480 for various reasons, but that's how we've set that up there, and a lot of the sites that are destination in style. So next slide, please. This one, I just wanted to touch on payment methods. Anytime I have the conversation about the Francis Energy chargers and how people pay for them, I try to figure out if they're a Tesla driver, because if they are, they have no idea what I'm talking about. If you drive a Tesla, you plug it in, it takes care of everything. It's a fantastic way of interacting with the charger. It's very simple. No issues. If you're on the other side of the spectrum, if you're using Electrify America or any of the others, you're going to see a multitude of payment options, whether it was a state requirement or what have you, or just driver preference. So for our chargers, we have obviously an app. There's an app for everything, and then an extension of that app can be a key fob, an RFID card, near field communication on your phone. You could scan a QR code on the screen. You can use a credit card. There are so many ways that you can start a charging session. It can make your head spin. But what I would say to that is what we're seeing coming out, we're hoping early next year, is similar to what the Tesla network has, which is effectively a plug and charge setup. So you just store your card information with your vehicle, and when you plug it in, it automatically handles the communication, the payment method. It will be great for all drivers, new drivers, as they start to venture out and use public fast charging in your areas. Last thing I want to say, just talking about small town communities, it is a different situation from the larger communities that we've put chargers in. It typically came down to finding a champion in that community. And I can tell you that I used every method possible and had the group I work with use every method possible, whether it was LinkedIn, whether it was Facebook, whether it was county assessor data, and even PlugShare. We would contact people directly on PlugShare to find someone to be a champion in that community so that we could figure out a project. And another thing about the smaller communities, it's funny, the chargers we put there, I don't anticipate the people that live there to really use them. I think it's great that it's really meant for their friends, their family, their business associates that come to those communities to have a way for them to bring their electric car back into those smaller communities. So that was just a brief bit on what we did. So again, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Sorry, took me a second to unmute myself. All right, so thank you so much, Matthew, and all of you from Oklahoma. We are striving to catch up with you eventually here in Louisiana. And so we're going to get going here with our story. So today I'm going to start things off to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've been doing with Clean Cities here in the state of Louisiana. Then Chelsea and Jeff are going to take it away and talk about what SWEPCO is doing and some of the programs that we've been working on together to try to improve our fueling infrastructure for electric vehicles in our state. So as I showed you earlier, we haven't really grown as fast as some of the others with electric vehicle adoption, but that is changing. And especially with the introduction of the Tesla Model 3, which is by far, after only being on the market for just over a year, it is the most popular electric vehicle in the state of Louisiana. And you can see that, you know, it's true as in most areas, the more densely populated areas are the ones where EV adoption is strongest. And here, like I said, the Tesla Model 3, this is the just total number of electric vehicles registered in the state of Louisiana as of the end of the first quarter of 2020. The Model 3 has not been out that long and it has already surpassed the Model S, the Chevy Volt. The Chevy Volt is no longer in production, but it was very, very popular when it was around. The Tesla Model X and the Nissan Leaf. So the Model 3 has really skyrocketed EV adoption in the state of Louisiana. We do have some EV fleets in Louisiana. We have, you know, most notable is our Department of Environmental Quality has just started adding electric vehicles to their fleet. We have chargers in the state garages now. We have the Lafayette Utility Services, Entergy, Sportrans Transit up in Shreveport, and CATS Transit System in Baton Rouge all now have electric vehicles in their fleets. And we talked about the corridors a little bit too, but I wanted to kind of go into this in a little bit more detail because we have had a real comprehensive project in Louisiana around corridors and Volkswagen settlement where we're really trying to be strategic, kind of on a dime to, you know, nice small budget, but we were able to really be strategic and getting a plan developed that kind of killed a couple of birds with one stone. So if you look at this, this was the end of the last round was completed. We had a few DC fast chargers along our I-10 corridor, but they weren't close enough to complete the corridor. And since then, we've had more electric vehicle charging infrastructure installed on I-10, but we've also had the Volkswagen settlement third round come through where the state of Louisiana is about to approve many chargers across the state of Louisiana that will help us to complete these corridors. And if you see the little inset here, you'll see what our alternate fuel corridor signs look like now. We have natural gas, compressed natural gas, liquefied natural gas, and propane. LPG is the acronym for propane. And there's a nice little empty space there. And that empty space, I'm determined to get that filled with EV. So show you here. This was back in 2019. We had this plan and we did gap analysis. So we figured out where the chargers needed to go in order to satisfy the requirements of the Federal Highway Administration Program. And we used a bunch of data sources and we crunched the numbers and we really came up with a plan that showed optimal places all over the state of Louisiana that would fulfill these requirements. And then we took this and we gave it to the state of Louisiana. And luckily the state agency that handles the Federal Highways Alternative Fuel Corridor Program is the same agency that is handling the Volkswagen settlement plan. So they were very excited to be able to help utilize some of their Volkswagen settlement funding to fulfill the requirements of this other plan and get our charging infrastructure. Now, all states have to go by the same regulations when it comes to spending Volkswagen settlement funding. You're only allowed to spend up to 15% of your total state's allotment on electric vehicle supply equipment, on the chargers. And our state only got 19 million total. So 15% of that is ours. That was our ceiling to be able to use to get chargers. So we really had to be smart about it. And that's why Louisiana Clean Fuels embarked upon this master plan, and with support from SWEPCO and CLECO, we funded this analysis and this study, and we gave it to the state of Louisiana. And the result is that pretty soon we are going to have, the awards will be out, and we believe that almost everything that we recommended, if not everything we recommended, will get funded. And this map right here will turn completely green. And there were a few spots that didn't get applications in that we recommended, but we believe that they will get funded by other means. So we got our fingers crossed on that. And another thing that's great that's happening in the state of Louisiana is we are part of a 14-state grant program, Drive for EVs in the USA. And we are just beginning to launch activities where we're going to be doing, we have activities in 7 areas where we're going to be, strengthening, we're going to be creating statewide programs. So ours is called Drive Electric Louisiana. We're going to be educating consumers with ride and drives. We're going to have chapters, Drive Electric Louisiana chapters all across the state, conducting these outreach and ride and drive programs. We're going to directly spend more time engaging with utilities and regulators. And we're going to be working with state agencies and local government officials, and we're going to engage with the dealers and the dealership programs. I saw there's a lot of questions going on about the dealership education program. So we will be working together with other states to develop these programs and launch them during this grant period. And the goal is to significantly increase electric vehicle adoption all across our state. So we're really excited about launching this program. Like I said, we're just getting started, and activities will begin with the new year. And another thing that's exciting that's happening in Louisiana is that our governor has initiated a climate initiative task force. And it started back in August. So the climate task force was selected, and just recently some of the committees have been named. And I'm excited to say that I have been invited to be on the transportation committee for the governor's task force. And so we will be working together with our stakeholders across the state and some fantastically qualified and just wonderful people on the transportation task force, and we'll be working together to make recommendations back to the governor on how to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And you better believe that electric vehicles are going to be part of that recommendation. So we're really excited about that. And so to get started with the rest of our Louisiana story, I'm going to introduce my friends at SWEPCO. Chelsea Attic is going to get started, and then I believe Jeff is going to pitch in as well. So take it away, Chelsea.
Thank you, Ann, and good afternoon, everyone. I really appreciate you joining this webinar. As Ann mentioned, my name is Chelsea Adcock, and I'm the Consumer Programs Marketing Coordinator for SWEPCO. And I'm joined by my colleague, Jeff Thigpen, who's our Alternative Energy Resource Manager, to tell the Louisiana story about how to prepare your hometown for EVs. So Jeff and I are pictured here. This is downtown Shreveport, and we're standing in front of a total electric bus. So as Ann mentioned earlier, this is one of the 5 buses electric buses that Sportran has in its fleet, and they have plans to have up to 8. And so Jeff's on the far left, I'm on the far right, and then standing in between us are our coworkers, Juana and Deborah. And so it's exciting to be able to wrap one of the buses. And so I believe this picture was taken about a year and a half ago. And so we've got a moving billboard in Northwest Louisiana talking about electrification. So you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. Before I dive in, if you're unfamiliar with SWEPCO, just wanted to give you a quick glance at who we are. So SWEPCO has been providing electricity since 1912, and today we serve over 500,000 customers in West Arkansas, Central and Northwest Louisiana, East Texas, and then a small pocket in the North Texas Panhandle. We are part of the American Electric Power family, and so I was excited to see a picture of one of the electric vehicles from our sister company, Public Service Company of Oklahoma, in a previous slide. So there are about 1,700 employees covering over 33,000 square miles of service area. And we are headquartered in Shreveport, Louisiana, which is where I'm based. And Jeff is just across the river in Bossier City. So if you wouldn't mind advancing the slides. So I started with SWEPCO a little over 2 years ago, and the consumer programs coordinator role was brand new. And so going right into 2019, I have to do a disclaimer that this was pre-COVID, because in my pictures, nobody's physically distanced or wearing masks. And so part of my introduction to working with an electric utility, but then also learning about electric vehicles, was quickly being connected to Ann Vale and her team at Louisiana Clean Fuels. So as she shared, your Clean Cities coalitions are absolutely there and available to you as a resource. And she was able to connect us with neighboring utilities and other stakeholders like De Niro Washington, who's the CEO of Sportran. He's on the Louisiana Clean Fuels Board and has just been a huge advocate for electric transportation, and has been a great resource to talk with, because he's moved so far forward in bringing electric buses to our area. And so their big project last year was, again, that DC fast charging master plan. And so as you saw, there were huge red lines in our service territory. So our main interstate highways are I-20, which runs east to west, and then I-49, which runs north to south. And so our neighboring utilities are CLECO and Entergy. And so using that Federal Highway Administration requirements of having to have a fast charger placed within 50 miles along those state highways, and then within 5 miles of the highway, we worked with those utilities to identify the best places to host a charging station site. And so from there, it was just working internally. So with our colleagues, so from our customer account managers who had the existing relationships with our business customers, who we would request to host this level 3 supply equipment. And then also our engineering team to be able to go look at those host sites and really determine what's the best way to provide service for the amount of charging stations that they want to have on their site. And so the two pictures that are in front of you on the left, that was an EV charging station or charging corridor roundtable. And so that's Ann presenting to a targeted group of stakeholders, so representing SWEPCO, representing our business customers who we think could really benefit from providing charging stations to their customers. And then on the right is a picture. Last September, we hosted an in-person National Drive Electric Week event. It was at the Whole Foods in Shreveport, and we chose that site because they provide a level 2 charge point charging station for its customers. And the last time I checked, you just have to have a charge point account, and you can fuel your car for free while you shop. So it is a very busy shopping center. And we partnered with 2 in-town dealerships. They were able to bring out a Jaguar E-Pace as well as an Audi e-tron. And then there were a number of SWEPCO customers and passionate EV owners who came out with their Teslas. We had a Honda Clarity, a Ford Focus, a BMW i3, and then I think a Toyota Prius Prime. And so that was great for our residential customers to be able to see electric vehicles and have the opportunity to get inside one, maybe go for a ride or a test drive. And so to Mark's point earlier, it's been a lot about education. So in addition to leveraging all of these partnerships, it's education on our end as a utility on how we can best support our customers, both commercial and residential, as these EV technologies continue to change and are being adopted at a much higher rate. So after those two events, it was definitely making contacts with vendors who provide the supply equipment. So just knowing what different options and technologies are out there and what makes the most sense. And then kind of last but not least, it was reaching out to dealerships in our service territory so that if a customer decides that they're ready to purchase an electric vehicle, there's one available to them and a knowledgeable salesperson who's able to talk them through the ins and outs of owning an electric vehicle. And then just to share a story of just kind of how SWEPCO is walking the walk. One of our EV owners is a SWEPCO employee in East Texas. He drives the BMW i3. And so SWEPCO is actually installing workplace charging. And so that's what he's done for years when he just looked at the commute he needed to make from his home to the office and just the transportation costs associated with his truck to now this electric sedan. He saves a lot of money. And so, but it's necessary that we provide that workplace charging because that's what makes sure that he's able to make that round trip. So if you won't mind advancing the slide, please. And so again, over the last year, as we talked with both residential and commercial customers, one of the big misconceptions is around where you charge your electric vehicle. And we've just been so conditioned with having gas-powered vehicles and needing to see gas stations. So whether it's seeing one on every corner when you're driving around town or seeing them every couple of miles when you're doing longer trips on highways, there's definitely this perception that a customer needs to see publicly available charging stations in order to be comfortable to make a purchase and bring one home. And so one of our goals working with Louisiana Clean Fuels is creating certified EV charging corridors along I-20 and I-49. And so we worked with the city of Minden and Bossier when identifying 2 host sites along I-20. And then, again, including the city of Bossier, but also the city of Natchitoches when identifying 2 sites along I-49, which runs north to south. And so we're hopeful that we'll be able to receive grant funding to pay for a significant portion of those level 3 fast chargers and be able to turn those red lines green. And so that was efforts through the VW Trust Fund. But I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, who's going to be able to talk to his Electrify America outreach and then where SWEPCO is looking to go.
Thank you, Chelsea. Yeah, we did reach out to Electrify America, and that's kind of a long process. They've not placed any more charging locations in the state just yet, but they are looking at it closely, and we've made suggestions for some locations, and we think we're going to make some headway there as well. But we do feel confident that we're soon going to have an announcement from the VW Mitigation Trust applications, and we'll be getting DC fast charging along I-20 and I-49. As was stated earlier, Oklahoma is well ahead of us in this, and one of the key actors there was Francis Energy, and we've been in contact. I've been in contact with them, Eric Austin and Alex Bass, for some time, and we do want to partner closely with them with site locations, and I think it might take a little bit of a different business model with them as they use in Oklahoma, but we do want to find something that works for them and us as well. Continue discussion with Electrify America on points, charge point as well, and others about placement of additional DC fast charging in our territory. We're talking with a large truck stop that's going to be constructed south of Shreveport. But it's as it was mentioned earlier in the Oklahoma discussion, we are an entrenched state with oil and gas, and it's a pretty difficult discussion sometimes, especially as someone that's made their entire fortune from the sale of gasoline and diesel, to make a little room for the EV charging on site. But we are making headway, and it's a large ship that needs to be turned, and maybe we have a small rudder, but we are working at it, and we do think we're going to have some really positive progress with all the groundwork that's been laid. We think this next few months things may look become have a little different look than we do right now. We go on to that next slide, please. Where are we today? That was kind of what we were asked to kind of talk about here. We want to provide information about EVs to customers. We want to be that go-to source. We've had to educate ourselves. We've got some pretty good information on our website. Like Chelsea said, we're participating in the National Drive Electric Week activities. We've purchased pool cars. We chose the Nissan Leaf, and we've got some of those. That goofy-looking guy standing there is me. We do have. We've wrapped that car. We're trying to let people know that we are driving these and using them, and really it's a learning platform for us. Just a little short story about the EV charging availability in Louisiana. I was able to borrow we were able to borrow a Nissan Leaf from Nissan Corporation, and they said, well, yeah, you can have it for about a month, but you need to pick it up in Metairie, Louisiana, which is, if you don't know, it's basically New Orleans, and that's pretty good drive from here to there. And I had quite an adventure bringing that up north, but it is possible, but it's a little bit of a cumbersome act right now if you do not have a Tesla, but we're about to make that change. We do have a level 2 EV charging station incentive rebate available through our EE programs. We also have an element of our new homes energy efficiency program that requirement for the home to be made EV ready, which is basically just installing a 240 volt plug. Does not have to have the charger, but a 240 volt plug in the garage, because we do believe that homes built from this point forward will be more marketable to new home buyers. Maybe not every buyer, but many of them will see that as an absolute positive and someone that was future thinking when they built those homes. If you go to that next slide, please. Where do we want to go? We have got to just increase the adoption in both commercial and residential, but it is critical that new construction allow for EV infrastructure as part of its early planning. It was discussed with the Oklahoma slides as well. At the cost that can be saved, commercial construction can save, from our numbers, about 50% of the cost of laying in the EV infrastructure. Residential cost, it could be 3 or 4 times less expensive than coming back and retrofitting and adding to your electric service. If you just put that in initially, basically you're just buying the plug. Very inexpensive. And if charging equipment isn't installed immediately on these commercial sites where the infrastructure is laid in, it makes sense to avoid the cost of destroying parking lots, curbs, landscaping, all that stuff going forward. But we need to obviously the VW mitigation trust funds. We need to pursue that in our other jurisdictions as well as Louisiana and Arkansas and Texas. Those are not opened up just yet. But we need to make sure that rural communities, we need to demonstrate to them that EV chargers, they actually create a destination for an EV owner. They draw tourists because they have that, and they'll go there looking for something to do, and it can actually, like I say, become a destination, and it can pay itself back very quickly. But we need to encourage the new construction to include the infrastructure. We need to, I want to encourage communities to reach out to your electric provider, reach out to SWEPCO if we serve you, and begin the discussion. Let's talk about options and how we can move forward on this stuff. We do want to work with communities, with the groups that are forward thinking and want to install some chargers. We want to work with you, and we want to help site location choices so that we can make sure that the costs are minimal and it works out for everybody. And we want to, as Oklahoma's done, we want to establish a statewide charging network. We initially need to get some fast chargers on these interstates. People are I think it's sort of a chicken and an egg situation. They're looking for the ability to charge a car as they drive down the highway in their gasoline car. They're looking for the ability to charge an EV. And until they see that, they're not going to be as ready to step forward and purchase one, even though once they educate themselves a little bit more, they'll see that vast majority of the charging is going to happen at home. So there's a lot of people that own EVs that never plug them into a DC fast charger. They use level 2 only, and it works out very well. And lastly, we definitely need to be involved in dealer sales training effort, as was discussed earlier. I know that Louisiana Clean Fuels is going to be involved in that. We will as well. Folks out of Oklahoma, we're discussing that, and absolutely necessary for the sales force to want to and understand, but they want to sell EVs, and they get excited about them. Most of them have never even sat in one and know nothing about them. So when you come on the lot, they're going to sell you what's sitting there. And until they have some internal forces, asking to keep these in stock, it's going to be a challenge. It's difficult right now in Shreveport, Louisiana. It's difficult to go buy an electric vehicle unless you happen to find a used one. So we need to work on changing that. But a lot of groundwork's been laid, and we feel like we're moving in the right direction. And that's really it.
Thank you so much. That was great, everybody. So we're going to be moving into Q&A, and I have discovered a little technical blip here. I've been doing webinars for almost a year now, and this is the first time I can't access my own Q&A. So I'm being fed some of the Q&A through the chat, and we also have some questions here. So if you have questions, I usually say put them in the Q&A, but I just this once will say it's okay to put them in the chat, but the other panelists have access to it, and they'll be able to answer your questions as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with a few of the questions, and panelists, y'all feel free to chime in and answer and repeat any of the other questions that y'all have seen on the chat during this presentation. We do have a few slides after this that are just kind of some housekeeping slides that we'll be showing you the link to our YouTube channel where you can view our old webinars, just like Matthew mentioned earlier. And we have a few additional resources for you that when you do get to go to our YouTube channel and view this again, you'll have some other resources there for you that can help get you started. So my favorite question, this is my question, is who are the two first organizations or types of organizations that you call when you want to get a program started? And I'm sure any of you can tell you what those two are, because that's who we are, right? It's Clean Cities and your utilities. Whoever your local Clean Cities Coalition is, you call us. And if you don't have a Clean Cities Coalition in your area, just call one nearby. We're always happy to help, and you call your local utility. All right, so this first question is for Eric and Adrian. Oh, wait, no, that was that. Okay, so what should we consider when deciding the speed of charger we want to install? And are there some locations where like a level 2 or a DC fast charger may make more sense?
I'll jump in on that. Yes, you want to consider what the people are going to expect when they show up in your location. How long do they actually want to be there? Are they there for a movie? Are they there to spend the night? Are they there to work? Are they there for a burger and then they're out? And so figuring out what people are going to expect in that location is really key. And also understanding what the capacity is at that location in terms of what electrical infrastructure exists and how much upgrade is going to have to happen to or not to make that charger happen.
Awesome, thank you. So I think this is pretty much for anyone, or if Adrian, since I already have you, if you maybe can't help me with this one, are there special challenges for on-street electric vehicle parking spots in areas where people don't have garages and they have to park on the street?
Well, so I think when I'll defer to somebody else on if it's a residential without a garage access, but just generally, on-street EV parking, I have a view that is very different than what most people seem to be. And I think that's because I also work inside the city planning organization. So my coworkers are city planners and land use planners and transportation planners. And so we're grappling with a bunch of different issues on how street space is used. And so in Tulsa, we have to date not had any on-street EV charging, and I've been really intentional about that's been like a sub crusade of mine because cities are grappling with so many other issues on the streetscape. And so if you want to put in a bike lane later, an EV charger there makes that tricky. If you have limited sidewalk space, an EV charger can just be another thing in a way. And then in Tulsa, another issue we deal with is people thinking they have a constitutional God-given right to park on the curb for free or for cheap. And by putting an EV charger there, it might get blocked by somebody who thinks it's their right to park there, or there's just congestion at that spot. And so what I tell everybody is if you have a parking lot or a parking garage to put a charger in, do that before you put it on the street. Because the other issue is, cutting curbs is cutting sidewalks. It's just more concrete you got to cut, and that's just expensive. But I will defer to others on the issue of residences without garages and on-street parking in that scenario, because that's a different beast.
Definitely.
Yeah, there just a couple of resources on that. I think Tacoma, Washington was an example of a city that's looked at that. Berkeley, California, Philadelphia, and I think that even New Orleans has some residential parking permitting that they've done. I just want to jump back really quick to the question of selecting what kind of charging on the residential side. And Mark may want to add to this, but I've talked to a lot of people that immediately think they need to go to level 2 when they have like a plug-in hybrid. And I have to tell them, a 110 is going to be fine for what you need. And so having that conversation from, just what their needs are, how much are they driving and those kind of things. In addition to talking to your clean cities and your utilities, especially for when people are putting in charging at home, we always tell them to talk to an electrician, which is important. But I think we've talked to Mark about this, and it's, you need to talk to your utility and your electrician before you jump in. And Mark, you may want to add to that.
Mark is having audio issues. He's going to sign out and sign back in.
Yeah. So just really quickly, I think he would say, if you have a household that when we do have an F-150 and they put in an F-150 in their garage, and then they maybe add a leaf on top of that, that is a case where the utility will need to know what you're putting in, because they may have to adjust the supply to your house or your neighborhood. So keep that in mind as we look to increase adoption.
Awesome. So Eric, can you very quickly tell us the difference between a plug-in electric vehicle and a fully electric vehicle? I don't think we covered that. And there are some people in the listening audience that don't have a lot of experience with electric vehicles. Sure.
Yeah. So a plug-in hybrid, the most famous example of that is a Chevy Volt. It runs off, it has a plug-in function, and it also has a gasoline power. So you'll use the electric portion of your charge until that's gone, and then it'll switch over to gasoline. So Matt's example of a Honda Clarity would be a plug-in hybrid. And we're going to just continue to see a lot of electrified versions of different cars. I think we all kind of jumped to all electric models, but for a lot of people, the plug-in hybrid is where they're going to start for a lot of reasons. And so I think we need to, think about that in terms of adoption too.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, so let me see. Is Mark back on yet? I don't see him.
Yes, I'm there. Can you hear me now?
Fantastic. So I have some questions for you, Mark. So
Okay.
what changes do you think we will likely see from electric utilities as we witness the evolution of electric vehicles?
One that jumps out clearly to us and from early adopters and things that we're seeing, I think we're going to have to see the evolution of the electric rate structure. Historically, utilities, especially at the home, have used what's called a bundled rate structure. So we have a relatively small customer charge, and then we just throw all of our cost in the cost of a kilowatt hour. And I think with the evolution of electric vehicles, and not only it, but the evolution of distributed energy resources like solar, things behind the bed, what we're seeing is more of a trend to move to an unbundled rate structure, even at the residential level, so that we can properly price energy. When you look at the cost of a kilowatt today, let's say it was 10 cents, we'll just use that for simplicity, really only about 4 cents of that 10 cents is related to the cost of energy. The other costs are more fixed cost related. So you've got 40% of a 10-cent kilowatt, it's energy, but today when you look at the cost of a kilowatt, it's 8 or 9 cents. So there's this imbalance, it's not properly proportioned. And I think what you're going to see is a trend where utilities unbundle their structure and they properly price energy. We're already starting to see some of our members that will have rates that will say from 10 o'clock at night to 5 o'clock in the morning, we'll sell you energy for 5 cents. But the other periods of time, it might be 12 cents. So they're letting you have a very clear signal of what they're going to sell you for, or they may have I just think it's an evolution of rate structures to send the signals of where these need to be. The other component will have to deal with the capacity or the demand. Even in its infancy, we're already starting to see homeowners that not only have one electric vehicle in their home, but they have two. And to give you a quick example, I don't know if this terminology, but the normal home would be something like 5 kilowatts of demand or 6 over an hour's period of time. When you add these chargers for these cars, this last individual gave his Nissan Leaf to his kids, and he decided to buy a Tesla Model Y. He loved it so much. Well, the charging alone now is 18 kW for the home, and the home's 5 kW on top of that. So just the charging itself is almost 4 times what the normal home usage is. And so I think there has to be rate structures to help him understand, hey, you have a capacity requirement because of the vehicles you drive. We love you for it, but we sure want you to charge those cars at the right time. So I think a lot of it will just be kind of evolution of retail rates and the educational effort that utilities are going to go to try to make sure that consumers understand when the right time to charge is. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So here's a question. I believe Eric said he would like to answer this one. Have any of your charging stations reached the point where vehicle turnover and wait time have become an issue? If so, how can this be addressed?
Yeah, that's probably more of a Matt question. I thought it was a good question. So, and I think the way I understood it is maybe for more on the level 2 side, if you have workplace charging, for example, I think that's a good challenge to point out. If you have people that are at a charger for 3+ hours, and I think there is some workplace challenges you'll have to think through on how you get cars to move around. So some of our other panelists may have some thoughts on that.
We have that in a few workplace applications. Again, I'll defer to Matt on the fast charging, but what we've encouraged our workplace providers is to do a cheaper option. They don't necessarily need all the bells and whistles for an early deployment of workplace charging, to go cheaper so you can do more. Because even with one of our parking garages with one of our largest gas companies in town, they are maxed out on their EV charging and they need more. So in a workplace scenario, going cheaper so you can do more is a good way to think that, a good step to take there. But Matt, are you seeing that on the fast charging side?
I'm sorry, I was putting out a fire real quick. Is this in regards to people utilizing or using a fast charger and getting in and out of that spot?
Yeah, capacity,
okay.
Turnover rates.
Oh yeah, well, so one of the things I get to focus on now is driver behavior and how we get them, how we either encourage or disincentivize them to stay in those spots is to, keep the meter running if they don't leave, but they're still in those spots. To this point, honestly, though, when we first built it out, it was not a focus. It was not something we wanted to touch on to make a big deal about. If the spots get blocked, we try to handle that by siting of the stations, not having the best parking spaces for the chargers to alleviate that. But other than that, there are other mechanisms such as leaving the meter running while they're there. So far, it's not an issue. We're watching what other communities and even countries are doing in that regard. So, but definitely like, waiting lists and things like that to notify people they're done and the next person is ready. So.
Yeah, I've seen some chargers that have idling fees after a certain amount of time. So where you may be paying a nice low rate to get your power, if you're there too long and you overstay your welcome, you'll start getting charged $3 a minute or so. So that's a great deterrent for someone to park their car and stay plugged in too long. But
Yeah,
now
we'll see.
plug and stay parked. that's
Yeah.
difficult.
I would just like to add real quick on that. One of the things we've seen in the co-op world, it becomes a great incentive. You're electric utility, you have employees that want to drive cars, but boy, you've got to get ahead of that too. Because first of all, you have a lot of your employees that don't drive EVs and they're wanting to know why, just because they drive an electric vehicle, that they can come to work and that's an employee benefit. The second problem that you get into is you have a lot of people that start driving EVs and you don't have enough plugs for everybody that wants one. I heard at a co-op that a group almost went to fisticuffs over who was going to be able to get into that parking spot because the first guy was an early adopter. And then now this young guy's come in and he's beating him to his parking spot every day. So, I mean, there's challenges that come with all of them, but it's just something that we're going to learn as we move forward.
Yeah. So what is that? You get free charging if you get your car parked before 7:30 a.m. Is that what you're doing?
Well, but it's to
early?
your point, Matt. Well, what you got to do, like at our facility, we have smart chargers. They only are allowed to charge for a certain period of time, and then they schedule that and they have to move because we have 367 employees. What if 25% of them all decide to drive AVs? I have 4 chargers out there, level 2, and those have to accommodate my fleet as well. So, I mean, it's just one of those things that we're kind of watching as it evolves, but what a great benefit. I've even heard now that the IRS is starting to try to figure out how they can tax the employer's benefit that they're providing in giving free electricity to employees that drive EVs because they're wanting to make it a part of their environmental goals. And this is happening now.
Yeah, so great training with your employees. Have HR initiate some good, strong protocols, can alleviate some of those issues as well. I have a question for Jeff that has come through. It says, as you build out your DC fast charging network in Louisiana, what speeds, what kilowatts are you recommending for those DC fast chargers? Have y'all gotten into that space yet where you're recommending certain sizes or speeds?
Well, I wish we would have had 20 examples to tell you, but no, I mean, we've had the discussions. I think that 50 kW are fine for a lot of locations, but when you get up on the interstates, there are going to be cars that will need a higher charge rate and want a quicker turn. I think that if you have the same question in 6 months or a year from now, the answers may change as the technology changes on some of these automobiles and on the charging equipment itself. But I think I would rather have, let me just make it this way. I would rather have a lot of 50 kW chargers as opposed to none. But it would be much preferable if you had access to 100 or 150 as well. There are very few automobiles right now that can go much higher than that, but they will be coming. So I think that back to the original discussion about planning for an expandable type network at a location is very important, that you might find yourself in 2 or 3 or 5 years needing to upgrade that service to meet the vehicle needs that are coming in there.
Awesome. We have time for just a couple more questions. Here is one for those of you who have been implementing pool cars into your fleets. So many of y'all had mentioned that you've added EVs, and do you have any data or some feedback or lessons learned that you can share about how that transition is progressing with your own fleets, with acceptance by the drivers?
And I would have some comments on that. We were a little shocked being an electric utility at some of the pushback that we had from our employees. You have to understand this is a new technology. Most people haven't driven an EV. And so we literally had to train them. Our legal counsel actually had us go through a training program so that every employee that drove a pool car had the ability to drive one under the supervision of someone else, to understand the torque, to understand all of the features that are unique. They're not that much different, but there are some unique features like regenerative braking, things along that line, so that they understand that aspect of it. But just how to fuel the car. When they bring the pool car back, they have to be trained on how to plug it in and how to use the smart technology. And we have a job form that they use to fill out their trip and the information that comes forward. So there's that piece. But it was the resistance that really surprised us. We have, again, we have several employees that they are concerned that when we send them maybe on a 2-hour trip across the state, am I going to be able to get home? And so they have an anxiety initially that until we can get them over that hurdle and kind of hold their hand and let them drive and experience that commute. And, to date, there's never been anybody that's taken the 7 cars that we have in our fleet. We have 40. And every time that a car hits a mileage number now, we are looking and evaluating what EV we will add back in. We're doing the same thing with our pickups. Eventually, we're going to move a very large percentage to that level. But it's due and it's different. And just a lot, we've seen from some of our employees that drive at night and they're going to get home later, if they have to stop somewhere. So we're showing them, look, when you stop, you can check on your email. It's a very safe location, has restroom facilities. So a lot of strategy and thought was put into it. But that was the thing that probably surprised us, was a little bit of the pushback from some of our employees.
Thank you, Mark. And Adrian, I know since you work in a planning commission, in a planning setting, there are other things that, maybe another municipality might need to consider, like ADA and LEED. Could you potentially go through a few of these things that we may not think of when it comes to adding electric vehicle charging infrastructure to our businesses and towns?
Sure. Yeah. If a building is pursuing LEED certification, then EV chargers can contribute LEED points to that. That actually was a good story from our library. We funded some chargers for their parking garage, which were actually the ones that are next to the arena as a destination location. And the chargers moved them from bronze to silver in their LEED certification there. Regarding ADA, that is really important to pay attention to. You've got to look at the grade of the slope of where those chargers are. One issue that we have seen, even if you make a site, even if the charger itself is ADA and the ground is level, if those bollards are placed not strategically, then it's basically impossible for someone in a wheelchair to access that screen and to get the charging cable to their car. And so those are some of the issues that are really important to think through as well. Like I said, and if you're looking at an on-street EV charging, I would look to see if there's others beyond on-street, because they're tough to make ADA. And there's just so many other things you can do with your curb space besides put an EV charger on it. So yeah.
Awesome. And
just,
go ahead, Eric.
Just to add on it really quick, and Mark and I think Matt made this point, the trucks are coming. It's really important, the Clean Cities Network is made up of a lot of fleet managers, and those discussions need to start happening quickly, because these orders are gonna stack up. And so but this is the big opportunity. I think that the consumer auto side is one thing, but the fleet side is a whole nother thing when it comes to adoption.
Thank you, Eric. And I want to encourage all the panelists to enter your emails into the chat so that our attendees can connect with you later on, because I'm not sure we had them in the presentations themselves. So Adrian, do you have some ADA and some LEED documentation, or Eric, do y'all have some that you can share with someone if they're interested?
We can get that for you. Yes.
Okay. right, so if y'all look in the chat, we are entering the email addresses for all the presenters here, so you can make sure that you all have that. So we just have a few additional slides that we just wanted to go through just to help you, just some wrapping up before we end. We do have all of our webinars posted on our YouTube channel. So you just go to YouTube and enter Louisiana Clean Fuels. All of our webinars are under the Webinar Wednesday series section. And this one will be posted within the next few days, but this is a list of some of the other electric vehicle themed webinars that we have done this year. So all this information is very up to date and ready for you to watch at your leisure. And again, of course, we want to very much thank you, our sponsor, Southwest Electric Power Company, SWEPCO, and the 2 other Clean Cities coalitions that have been here today helping us. That is Clean Cities of Central Oklahoma and the Tulsa Area Clean Cities. That is Adrian and Eric. Thank you all so much for participating with us today. And here's my contact information. It's ann@louisianacleanfuels.org. But when you see the video, where I just want to go through these so you can have access to all these slides, there's some list of questions to get started, some things to ask, and some links to some information. We have a glossary in case you're a super newbie and you want to understand what's all this kWh and kW and watts and voltage. We got the definitions in here for you so you can sound like you know what you're talking about. And we have some great resources at the AFDC, whereas plug-in electric vehicle handbooks for fleet managers, for workplace charging hosts, and for public charging station hosts. So these documents are all very technical, can really help you get started. You know, shoot them over to your public works departments, to your engineers, and they're just phenomenal resources. And of course, you can always email one of us if you have difficulty finding this or you're looking for more information. And we have state and federal tax credits. The federal tax credits for vehicles like Tesla and the Chevy Volt and Bolt are over. But there are some other newer companies that are coming out. They will still be able to get that. But anybody know when the sunset date is on the federal vehicle tax credits? Is there an expiration date, or are they still going strong?
By OEM, so.
Just by OEM, there's no other effort to try to get rid of them?
I haven't heard of any other changes.
Okay.
Oh, sure. Our senator's trying to end them, but you can find out on. It's true. You can
Talk
find
about
out.
snowball like that.
You can find out at fueleconomy.gov. You can see the status of each tax credit and where it is for each model, because it does vary by model and manufacturer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have that right there. Fueleconomy.
Oh, there you go.
And the state tax credits for Louisiana are due to sunset in 2022, but currently they are $2,500 for a new vehicle, or a 30% tax credit for fueling equipment. And it is not advancing. That must be the last slide. Okay. So thank you all for coming today. We will post this, and thank you for joining us. So we will be sending you the link soon. Have a great day. And this concludes our webinar.